Caribbeans. Their host, Cindy Allman, will introduce them properly, but let me tell you just a little bit about Cindy. If you love books and you exist in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, you will not have been able to evade the powerful allure that is Book of Sins. Cindy's done so much for the book vlogging and online industry, and we are extremely grateful to her. She's made the hashtag Read Caribbean campaign extremely popular and helped revolutionize reading for all of us. We also want to give a special shout out to the Rolex Mentor and Protégé Arts Initiative, who have helped enable Ayesha Harruna Attah to be here. Without further ado, please welcome Ayesha Harruna Attah, Sarah Das, and NG Peltier in conversation with Cindy Allman.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here on this bright Sunday morning. We're here to talk Caribbean literature. We're here to talk love, and we're here to be in conversation with these three amazing authors. Thank you so much for your time. So I'm just going to have each of them introduce themselves and talk a bit about the books that we'll be discussing today, and then we'll jump right into question and answers. So I'll start with Ayesha because she's A, so alphabetical order.
Thank you everyone for being here this morning. My name is Ayesha Harruna Attah. I'm a Ghanaian writer living in Senegal. This is my first time in the Caribbean, my first time at the Booker's Lit Fest. Thank you. So Zainab Takes New York is a rom-com, and I wrote this in 2020 when I thought the world was going to end. I thought, if we're all going to die, why don't you do that joyous piece of fiction you've been dying to do since forever? So it just poured out of me, and it's love letter to New York City also, because I lived in New York for a long time, and I remember reading books about New York, the slew of them. Here's New York, there's Teju Cole's Open City, Anne Petrie's The Street. So many books about New York, and I thought, just do it. Write your rom-com and make it a love letter to New York. So that's how this book came about.
Perfect. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My family right there, so if you hear them, you know that's them. My name is Sarah Das. Where the Rhythm Takes You is my debut novel. It came out in 2021. It came out in 2021, Where the Rhythm Takes You. It's a young adult contemporary novel. It's about a girl named Tess who has a girl named Raina. I'm mixing it up with my second book, sorry. It's about a girl named Raina who gets her second chance at first love when her ex-boyfriend returns after a couple years abroad, during which she'd become a famous musician. But now he's back, and he and his friends end up at the hotel that Raina's family owns and runs. And through circumstances, they end up having to spend time together, and old feelings reignite. It is a retelling of Jane Austen's Persuasion.
And it's literally the Caribbean equivalent of Old Fire Stick, easy for catch. NG, over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, Cindy. Hi, everyone. My name is NG Peltier, and I'm here to talk about my second book. This is the second book in my Island Bite series, Don't Go Baking My Heart. So this book follows Devon King and Reba Johnson. Devon is trying to win a bake-off at work because, he's trying to be more of a people person, which he's not, in order to help him get a promotion that he's trying to get at work. And he has no kind of baking skills whatsoever. So now he has to get Reba to help him. And she's the complete opposite of him. And so they're forced to work together. And I just thought their dynamic is extremely exciting because he's a Virgo, she's a Libra. They kind of clash, but yet they're kind of falling in love. So that's what the book is really about. Thank you.
Yes, I read all three and I absolutely love them. And this panel is about matters of the heart. And I just want to talk about all three authors. I know you gave a dedication to a love letter of the book, who it's written to. For you, it's New York. For you, it's Tobago, Twin Island Republic, Tobago, where she currently lives. And for you, it's your mom. So if you could just talk a bit more about that love letter of you writing a book to something that you love. I guess I'll start with NG.
Well, when I was writing this book, I didn't specifically write it to my mom, but unfortunately, while I was editing it, she passed away in 2021, and she would have read my first book. Now, people who know my mother, she's not a reader. She does not really read. My father was the one who was the avid reader. That's where I got my love for reading from. And when she told me she wanted to read my first book, I was like, I don't know about this. It has some sex scenes in it.
Spicy.
But I mean, she read it and she actually loved it. So I was really shocked. So when she passed, I said, I have to dedicate this book to her because I know she would have been very proud of me. So that's really why, yeah.
So I was born in Trinidad, but I moved to Tobago when I was 2 years old. So most of my life, I grew up there, I've lived there, and Tobago doesn't really appear in fiction very often. If it is a book that is set in Trinidad and Tobago, it's usually in Trinidad. And I don't know, I loved rom-coms growing up, I loved young adult books, and I just very much wanted to write something that I loved and setting it in the place that I loved.
Okay. Love. And New York for you?
So New York has been written about a lot. Like, it's very different from Tobago. But for me, I think when I moved to New York, I went there for grad school. I just felt like a sense of, wow, this is a place where you can do anything that you want. And you can walk down the street and be as crazy as you want, and nobody's going to say anything to you. So that sense of like just possibility always struck me and stuck with me. And then, of course, as I lived in New York, I had my own string of heartbreaks and stories that my friends had also been through. And some of them were just too crazy to keep to myself. So this book sometimes borrows from my friends' stories, from my own stories. I'm not going to say which, but New York is just such a fun place. And when I was coming up, this was 2005, the biggest thing that young women my age the thing that they were watching was Sex and the City. We loved Sex and the City. So then I thought, okay, let's do the African Sex and the City. And also because just writing about place is so important to me. So for a place that had defined me, felt like a thing to do, to take apart the city, see how its heart beats, see how it comes together, and then write a love story set in this place. So it's doing two things at the same time.
And I think you did a phenomenal job of that. So my next question is love. That's what these three books are about, and specifically how these women find love and what do they learn about themselves in the process of finding love. So we have Raina and Aiden, we have Devon and Reba, and we have Zainab and all of New York. So let's start with the one that has the least amount. Angie, will go with you. About Devon and Reba. What does Reba find out about herself once she was like looking for love? What does she learn about herself in the process of finding love?
Well, actually, Reba was not really initially looking for love. When the book started, she's just the kind of person who, she's very spontaneous, she likes to do whatever she wants, and Devon is the complete opposite, right? So these two weren't really looking for each other, but they end up forced to work together. So I think it's very interesting that even though she is this person who isn't about planning, she's very spontaneous, spur of the moment, and he, kind of like me, because I'm a Virgo, he's a Virgo, he loves spreadsheets. He has spreadsheets for everything, but I did make him a little more on the extreme end. So I think what they learn about each other is that he realizes, okay, maybe I'm a little too rigid in the way I approach things. So even though he kind of goes down fighting to the end, he learns that I need to loosen up a little bit. I need to have a little fun. I won't die if I smile every now and then. And then on the flip side, she learns, okay, I can be the spontaneous person. I can be the person who does some things on a whim, but I do need a little structure in my life as well. And while I was writing these characters, what I learned about myself is, even though I said I was going to make Devon a little more extreme than I was, I think I am more like Devon than I thought, because there's a specific scene in the book where they're baking, and they're washing up whatever wares they've used, and Reba is offering to, help him stack the wares, and he's like, no, I have a very specific stacking system for my wares, so I'll deal with it, because he's worried that she's gonna just put stuff haphazardly all over the place. And there was a day I was home, and I'm like, okay, my brother kind of put the wares anyhow, and I'm like, you need to look at how it is to see how the small wares could fit, and I'm like, hold up. This is sounding very much like Devon. So I realized that about myself as well. You just need to be open to love as well. Even though you might have had some challenges in the past, you should always be open no matter, what may have happened in the past. So
I love that. Sarah?
So in Where the Rhythm Takes You, both of the characters, Raina and Aiden, they're artists. Raina is a painter, and Aiden is a musician, a songwriter. And this art is how they bonded initially, how they came together, and then it was also, in some ways, the way they communicated with each other. And in writing the book, I learned that their romance ended up influencing their art. And it was as well with Aiden. He had to sort of reconcile himself to the fact and put himself into a vulnerable position to make better art. And that's something I think I learned from the book, basically, that, sometimes you have to, take things from your life that might make you vulnerable. But ultimately, I think in fiction, readers can sort of pick up on that piece of authenticity, and that is something that stands out. Yeah.
I love that. Ayesha?
So in this book, I think that there are 3 layers of love that Zainab is looking for. So she comes to the city and she's thirsty. She wants a boyfriend. That's the first thing. She's thirsty. And then she starts hearing these voices, and they become part of her, and they send her down a search for her own family story. So there's that family love story, and she comes from a family where her parents have been divorced for a long time. She's grown up mostly with her mother, and her father is almost like the love of her life, because she holds him up to this ideal. So there's that family love story. She has a complicated relationship with her mother and loves her to death but can't stand her at the same time. So there's that family love story going on. Actually, there are 4 layers. And then there's New York, the love that she has, or the love that she's developing for this city, because she just moves there as the story unfolds. And then the 4th layer is for her art. Zainab is also an illustrator. So in a way, I explored questions of creativity in this book. Where do ideas come from? Why do we get fascinated about certain things? And why do we fixate on those? Like, for all of us, I'm sure there are reasons why we write a certain character or why a certain theme is important to us. So Zainab is illustrating, and for a while she's a bit lost, but when her family connection comes into it, then she gets clear on what her purpose is. And it really is an homage to the process of creating and where ideas come from. So there are these 4 layers in this book.
I like that, because even in the 3 books, I feel like all 3 of the women are going through the same thing. Identity crisis. They're going through love. They're going through family expectation. What should I do next with my life? There's this whole love story that's going on. And I think when you pick up a rom-com or a romance novel, you're like, oh, I just want to get away. It's a beach read. I don't want to think about anything. But I was like, y'all are pulling me in and making me think, and I don't like this for myself. So I just love how the women are very much like, very much in who they are and what they want. For Reba, she's like, yo, I'm going to get Devon and he's going to fall for me. For Raina, she's like, you know what, I'm going to run this hotel. My mom is going to be very proud of me. And for Zainab, she's like, I'm going to lose my virginity. But also she's like, I'm also going to write a graphic novel and I'm going to do really well at my job. So I just want to talk more about that. You know, you're writing this rom-com, but like, what is the story that you want people to take away? What is one thing that you want the readers to like know about these characters and who they are? I'll start out with you.
So I think for me, sometimes when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about that question So I didn't quite set out to have a takeaway for my readers. But once it was done, I think that the main kernel was this idea of creativity and how it flows into love and comes back. And there's this cycle, and how to create, you have to love. And so I think at its heart is the link between love and creating. Yeah, yeah.
Sarah.
I haven't mentioned it yet, but quite a big part of the book is that Raina's mother passed away before the current timeline of the book, which means that for quite a lot of it, she's dealing with grief and guilt because they didn't have the best relationship. And also, she and her mother had very different ideas for what Raina would do with her life. Her mother very much wanted her to run the hotel, whereas Raina wanted to be an artist, wanted to leave Tobago and explore and all these things. And so, but after her mom passed away, she sort of felt guilty about doing these things. And I just wanted people to take away sort of, it's okay to move on. These feelings, sometimes you might feel guilty about it, sometimes it might feel complicated emotions, but it's okay. It's very normal. It's part of grief, and just to be fearless when it comes to what you want from life.
Nice. Angie?
Okay, so for me, I wanted people to realize that you don't have to change the whole essence of who you are to find love, because as I mentioned before, Reba and Devon are very different people, and even though they learn certain things from each other, at no time do they completely do a 180 and be like, okay, I have to be a totally different person in order for this person who I have feelings for to actually, see me and fall in love with me and like me. So I just really wanted people to realize, you could continue to be your true self, learn things from the person, but you don't have to change the very core of who you are for somebody else. They'll love you as you are.
Yeah. And Angie, I think you did such a great job of writing characters who are not one-dimensional. I mean, we have Devon who has a spreadsheet on why a relationship won't work. And he puts into these formulas to see if it will work or it won't work. And I'm like, sir. And Reba, who shows up every single day in a different wig. And I'm like, I just love their chemistry. One thing that I do want to talk about, because it is a romance novel, so there is very much the spice level. We have where the rhythm takes us, which is mild, Zainab, which is hot, and Don't Go Baking My Heart, which is spicy. When I read in the back that your mother read this, I'm like, what? So I want you to talk more about how you went about writing the book, because it would have an impact on genre and who can read it and age group. So talk to me more about that. I guess I'll start with you.
So, Zainab being hot. I guess I love writing desire. That push and pull. Will they not? And I find that so attractive in books and in life. So that kind of, the tension that just rises to the surface, that's my jam. And then after that, I'm like, okay, whatever you do is up to you. But that kind of tension is really, really interesting to me. So I guess that comes through in my books, even when I'm not writing a love story. And I didn't write this with an age in mind. I guess my mother had read my third book. This is my fifth book. And in the third book, there were a few raunchy scenes. And she read it with her big sister, who's my aunt, who was in her maybe 60s, 70s then. And I thought, okay, so if everybody's reading this book, then we're good. We're good. So that took away the fear of going there, I guess. And so.
And I love that you talk about the tension, because I feel like sometimes you're reading a rom-com and it's like, okay, I no longer care. Because the tension is there, it's there, and then you're like, okay, if you don't get together, I'm gonna literally throw this book away. And I think you ended it right where I'm like, okay, good. Such a good job. Angie, let's go with the hottest, spicy one.
Okay. I did not really write this with a specific audience in mind. I mean, I knew it was going to be adult.
Yeah.
So I felt pretty comfortable, with certain heat levels. Of course, when I write a book, I don't set out to be like, okay, every book has to be spicy. I think about what is right for the characters, because for me, it's going to be different. And I've mentioned this before to many people in other panels. Sex scenes are the worst for me to write. I don't like to write them.
But you do them so well.
I like to write them because they're very difficult. Like banter between the characters, very easy for me to write. I love writing that. But when it comes to these sex scenes, you have to think about so many things. Okay, the angles. It can't feel stale. It has to be interesting for people. It can't be boring. If you have multiple sex scenes in your book, it can't seem repetitive, right? But then you also want to include, the tension. Make sure they're having fun as well, because you don't want people to be too serious. I mean, unless that's how the characters are. So I had to think about all of this. So I'm like, okay, is it going to be spicy enough? If it's going to be interesting, are the characters going to be having fun? So thank you for saying I wrote them well, but I don't really enjoy writing them all the time because there's too much technical things going on. But yeah, I just wanted to show the characters, and the emotions as well. I need to have emotions happening regardless of what that emotion is at the time. Make sure that's happening in the scene. So there's a lot to think about when I write these scenes. And usually when I start off, like the first draft, I just write. I don't edit as I go, right? I come back and I revise. And then when I come back is when I add like the emotional aspect of it, because I'm like, okay, all the technical stuff is happening, but I need to put in that tension, that emotion, that chemistry, because those things are really important to me as a writer as well as a reader. Nobody wants to read a stale sex scene, right? So all these things I have to think about when I'm, working on these scenes.
Okay, good job. And Sarah, mild.
Definitely compared to the other two. But yeah, even though it was written for young adults in mind, they are 17, 18, so there are hints of attraction and so on. But anyone who's read Persuasion knows it's about longing. It's about slow burn. So yeah, so this book is very much a slow burn, and it's two people who have drifted apart, learning how to love each other again. Yeah.
And there's a use of comedy in all three books. Y'all are very hilarious. And I don't know if y'all are hilarious in real life, but I'm reading these books and I'm cracking up. So I just want to talk about comedy because it does break up the tension and it moves the plot along. So how do you write comedy into your romance novel? Let's go with you, Sarah.
First of all, I'd like to say that when my family read my book, which I asked them not to, or if they did read it, not to tell me they read it. And they all read it and they all told me. I think it was my sister, I'm not sure who, was like, I didn't realize you were so funny. So I'm guessing that I'm not as funny in real life. That's what I took from that. But yeah, I think a lot of my comedy comes in the voice of the character. She has a little bit of a saucy attitude to her. So a lot of it comes from the voice, and it is something that I think I work on after the story and the characters and stuff. It's something that I do pay attention to, and it's something I inject into my book because I very much want people to enjoy my book. Yeah, I want them to laugh and, with the characters and so on. A lot of the comedy comes from the characters as well, their personalities. I do like the rom-com thing of having like quirkier characters, So yeah, I think it is something I work on. It's something I pay attention to, and I'm glad you said you enjoy that. Yeah.
Definitely. Angie?
Well, I am the opposite. I guess the funniness just happens organically because I did not, purposefully set out to make the books funny. I love rom-coms in general, but Yeah, I don't know. It just comes out when the characters are speaking. Now, I don't know if my family or friends think I'm funny, right? I don't really think I'm funny, but maybe I am. Yeah, so I don't really go about intentionally saying, okay, I want to insert a joke here.
Yeah.
Because I am not really a heavy plotter in general when I'm writing. I'm actually what you call a pantser. So I might make little notes. I just let the characters do whatever they want most of the times, and it kind of works out. So I guess, yeah, it just happens. It just happens organically for me. But I do enjoy when readers, either they message me or they tell me, the book was so funny, or it made me feel happy. I was down and it cheered me up. So that is important to me as well. So, I'm glad you think my books are funny. So.
So I think life can be so humorous sometimes. I think, like even in difficult situations, I find myself like laughing, and I think I grew up in a place that has some of the craziest situations that one could find. Like West Africans are hilarious. West Africans are hilarious. So I was talking to some other writers, and we kept saying for a place that has such a sense of humor, fiction tends to be very serious, very, very serious. But like go into the streets in Accra, in Lagos, and people are always telling stories. And I think it's like here in the Caribbean. So I try to imbue my books with a sense of life and copy and paste that into my stories. And so in this case, Zainab's grandmothers are the ones who provide a lot of the humor. And the funny scenes also come in her relationships with her besties. Because for me, like, I don't know if I'm funny, but I think my really, really close circle might say that I am. And that humor comes out when I'm with them. So in this book, like, Zainab has really good friends, and that's where the hilarity comes from also. Just everyday situations with besties, and that's where it comes out.
Thanks. So all three are rom-com. Two is set in the Caribbean and one is set in New York. I know for you, you've wrote historical fiction before, you've wrote YA. So yesterday in your panel, you said the reception of this book, I'm assuming it was this book, wasn't what you thought it would be. So I just want you to walk me through that, because I feel like as a writer, sometimes people don't gravitate to romance or rom-com. So if you could talk some more to people about that reception, if they weren't here yesterday, and I guess for you, writing about Tobago, writing from the Caribbean, writing about a rom-com, what the reception was like locally or just in general.
So by reception, I was mostly talking about the way the book has been marketed, but I've had good feedback from people who've read it. So I don't read reviews.
Good job.
I just don't.
Congratulations.
So I don't really know what the reader's reactions to the book is, because I found it's not really helpful. And if I'm getting feedback, it's from other writers who've read the book or who are editing with me, and that I find invaluable. But apart from that, once it's out there in the world, I'm like, it's gone. Yeah. It's out of my hands, and people engage with books differently, so it will find its readers, and when it does, that's great. So if they reach out to me, then I'm like, okay, yay, it's done its job. But I wish it had a bigger push. I wish it had like the 100 Also Salaga translations, things like that. That's what I meant by reception, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, 100 Wells of Salaga was my favorite. Where the Rhythm, how was the reception? I mean, it's a book set in Tobago, which, as you said, I've been reading Caribbean for a long while, and this was the first book I've read that was set in Tobago. So can you talk to me about that, how the reception has been?
Well, the book is published with HarperCollins in America, and I very much wanted to publish with an American publishing house just because they have the reach, And I've been very lucky. The book has been translated into Russian, which like blew my mind that there are people, reading it in Russia. And so it has had reach, and I've seen pictures of it on shelves in Ireland and the UK, and all of that. I think it has been really mind blowing. I also don't read reader reviews. I think that the review, I have gotten some feedback from specifically Trinidad and Tobagonians, people in the Caribbean, and I think like they've written to me and they've talked about how familiar the setting is, like little aspects of it that reminds them of their childhood. People in the diaspora like mentioning, yeah, I used to go and do these things too. And that just means so much to me, that because I think at the core the book is written for them. Especially, even though it's published abroad, even though I welcome all readers, I especially am thankful that they're finding the book and they're finding and relating to the characters in the book.
And I absolutely, if you've read the book or if you have a copy of the book, there is a playlist at the back with an entire soca playlist. So if you're not from Trinidad, if you're looking to get into Trinidad soca, I really second that playlist. I love it. And for you, Angie?
So I'm going to echo the other authors. I do not read my reviews. I try to, have that line between readers and author, although there have been some people who have tagged me on like Instagram in reviews, but luckily they've all been good, because I know some authors get tagged in awful reviews, and as I say, it's fine. You do not have to enjoy my books. You do not have to like my books, but don't tell me about it, right? But so the people who have, reached out to me, they echo similar sentiments to what Tara was saying. They're like, they could feel the Caribbeanness from the book, so I'm always glad about that. But yeah, I think the reception has been good. And interestingly enough, so my two books, this one and the first one, Sweet Hand, are actually both traditionally published and self-published. Yeah.
Yeah, well, can you just talk a bit about the story about Sweet Hand, how it got published? Because I think it's such an interesting story.
Okay, so I first got my agent through a Twitter pitch contest. My agent is a U.S. agent. She lives abroad. I actually haven't met her in person yet. I'm hoping the next time I go to New York, I will actually meet her in person. So we communicate via email and telephone. So when I got so after I did the Twitter pitch competition, the agents who like your Twitter pitch, you can do your research on them. You can send them whatever materials they want. It might be the first 50 pages, how much ever chapters. So some months are passing, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't seem like anybody's, biting. So I'm working on other stuff. And then I get an email from the person who's my now agent asking me if I'm still looking for offer representation and if I want to get on the calls. I'm like, okay, this is very exciting. So there I am scrambling, Googling what to ask an agent on the call, having that up and talking to her. And the first thing she said to me was, she loved the book because it's not set in the US or the UK. It's set in Trinidad, and it made her want to eat Trini food and listen to soca. And then eventually we decided to go on submission with Sweet Hand to a couple US publishers. However, we didn't really have any bites there. We got rejection. So I said, I feel in my gut that I don't want to put aside this book, because I had two choices: either work on something else and shelve Sweet Hand for now. But I said, no, I want to self-publish it. And she said, yeah, that's fine, because she, on her side, could work on getting an audiobook published, because she has those connections. So while I was doing my cover review, shout out to Lenny Coffin for my amazing and beautiful book covers, my agent came back to me and said, oh, by the way, UK publisher saw your cover review and wants us to submit. I'm like, what is happening? What is going on? So we had a bunch of offers from UK publishers and eventually decided to go with Piatkas. So yeah, that's how come I both traditionally published and self-published. So I actually do not have the rights to sell my book in Trinidad. The UK publisher has those rights, weirdly enough, right? So yeah, that's a little bit of that story.
But copies are here, so don't tell anyone. Copies are here. Go get a copy and get it signed. Sarah, I'd love for you to talk to me about how you got published from Tobago. Like, can you just give us a little rundown on that?
Yes. I have had people from Trinidad and Tobago ask me how did you get published with a US publisher? And so much of it is done on email these days, so that's not something to really worry about too much. I got published. I think I had written a book, queried it with agents, it went nowhere. Then I wrote another book, and then I ended up entering a competition called Pitch Wars online. It doesn't exist anymore, but it's where you work with a mentor, a published author, and they help give you guidance on how to revise your book before you resubmit them to agents. And I ended up getting an agent through this. And then we went on submission, and I ended up getting a deal with HarperCollins. I've just shortened it, but this took quite a while. It took about 5 years, 6 years to publication. Yeah.
Every time authors mention how long it goes to publication, I'm like, and then I read a book in 2 hours and like,
yes.
Hi, when are you writing the next one? It's so unfair, but honestly, when are you writing the next one? We'll start with you, Ayesha.
For real? I'm working on a new book right now. I also, Natalie, I draft my novels. I write what's called a shitty first draft. This is a technique I learned from Anne Lamott, a book I recommend for all writers in here. It's called Bird by Bird. And it's such a gentle way to write a book. So you just pour what's in your heart and your mind on paper, and then don't show it to anyone. You're not allowed to show it to anyone. I broke my rule yesterday. I showed it to my mentor, Bernadine, who is in the audience, and my heart was racing, like, oh my God, this is so rough. But you write this first draft, and then you can put it down for days, months, weeks, whatever works for you. Then you come back and rewrite. And rewriting is where the work actually begins. This is where you take apart sentences, you think of my characters, what are their motivations, do things make sense, are there inconsistencies? So this is where the actual work begins, and this can take anywhere from a couple of months to years even. Like I think with the $100 of Salaga, it took me 6 years to write that book, because I threw away previous drafts, I rewrote, and then to get the voice of the book, that took a while also, like the point of view, who was going to tell the story. I considered doing a girl, woman, other, and doing like 12 characters, and it didn't work. So then I whittled it down to 2. So all of these things come in rewriting. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So I don't know when the next book is coming out. My long answer.
You heard it here first. To be decided. Sarah, I know you have one coming out now, so.
Yes. I have my second book, When the Vibe is Right. It will be coming out next month. Oh, wow. Yes. Very excited about it. It's May 30th. This one's going to be a Much Ado About Nothing inspired book. Another young adult book. I'm very excited about it. And then I have another book coming out next year. It's called It Waits in the Forest, and it's my first attempt at supernatural thriller. Yeah, so I'm excited about that as well. Yeah.
NG, I won't ask you because you literally just published Don't Go Breaking My Heart, but
I mean, I am working on book 3. It's in progress, and I did finish writing a draft, the first draft of a book in another series, so I am revising that as well. So I don't know when the next books are gonna come out, but stuff is in progress.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm gonna open the floor to question and answers, please. Any questions? Yay! I love questions. Anybody's passing the mic. I guess we'll just continue. Yeah, go ahead. I don't think it's on. Oh, hold on.
It's still not working.
Good question. Wow. Who wants to go first?
Um,
Oh, can you hear the question? Oh, she said she read a book about patriarchy, and basically she wanted to get the author's response on what resistance they got from writing a woman romance book and what that was like publishing within the romance genre for women.
okay, I'll go first. I have honestly not gotten any resistance because I've been a part of the romance community for many years before I even published anything. So, they were always very supportive of me. And I never really hid what I wrote from my family. So, and they didn't say, oh, why are you writing romance? Whether they read it or not, they've always been very supportive. I mean, and what you're saying is true. I know there are people whose family members or friends will be like, why are you writing that? Because even though I personally haven't gotten the resistance, I see people speaking about the same things you spoke about, online. People have this perception of romance that, it's not up there with like literary fiction or anything like that. But for me, I'm like, I just want all the possible stories that could come out of the Caribbean. Yes, a lot of stuff that is published is literary fiction and might be more on the serious side, but that doesn't mean, romance doesn't also deal with tough subjects as well. It does. So while I have not gotten the pushback myself, I know there are people who have experienced this and have spoken about it firsthand.
I have gotten a little bit of pushback, not from my family. They're here, they're supporting me.
Has to lie.
But they've been great, but I have gotten pushback on two fronts because I write romance, but also I write YA. And both, I do get some resistance and, thinking that it must be easier to write, it's less valuable. And more so from the romance side, surprisingly. And I can think of two instances where I actually told somebody what I wrote. Both times it was men, and they kind of dismissed it. One was like, like 50 Shades of Grey, and then laughed and walked off. And that was like, okay. That actually made it into my second book, by the way. And that sort of, it did hurt, because it's sort of like, you put so much time and so much effort, and I love what I write. I enjoy writing it, and I'm happy that other people are reading it and enjoying it. So that sort of dismissive attitude does hurt, but at the end of the day, I just have to keep in mind why I'm doing it and know that I love what I do. Yeah.
So not with this book. I haven't had any pushback so far with it. But I remember when I wrote my first novel, it's called Hamatan Rain, set in Ghana over 50 years of the country's history. And it was very woman-centered. It was 3 generations of her family. And I remember one male review said it was chick lit and just dismissed it. And at the time, I was really hurt, but now I'm happy to claim it. And so what if it's chick lit? That's who I write for chicks. So what? But I think I also try not, even though it has been marketed as a rom-com, I just wrote it as I did any other one of my books. And I am trying as a person with my philosophy to break out of a very Eurocentric way of dividing the world, labeling the world. And where I come from, there were no such labels. You live. Sometimes you're dancing to exorcise a demon, and it is what it is. And sometimes you're doing other things. So I'm trying to live more in that fluid space in the way my ancestors did. So, yeah.
Good answer. Great answer. I love that you said that you're, because in Caribbean literature, you're right that a lot of the books that we generally read is very much serious, very literary fiction, and it's very buttoned up, even for the Caribbean. And I just love that there's a space where we have writers who are writing things that I don't have to put down the book every 3 minutes because it's trauma. So I love that there's a space where we could actually go and kind of live a little. I think somebody else had a question. Go ahead, Lauren. I think she's coming with the mic. Yeah, the mic works this time. I'm just going to repeat it for the audience. Cherie's like, repeat it. She's asking about the differences in romance novels from older generation, aka Mills and Boons, Daniel Steele, and millennial romance novels now. I mean, I can say for myself, I grew up inhaling Daniel Steele, and I probably shouldn't have been reading Daniel Steele. Like, what was my mother thinking? But I'd love to hear how that has changed for millennials.
I think it's just the diversity that there is now. Like, you can read romances from all over the world, and my publisher, Cassava Republic, they're based in Nigeria and the UK. They have a romance series now, like the Harlequin or Mills and Boone. It's called Ankara Press, so you can have African romance. So I think just having access to a world of romance from everywhere, that's what I've seen personally.
I think people, millennials and younger, I think we're more aware of some of the problematic elements of the older novels. So we try to avoid those. We also
say it with your chest. Say it with your chest. For example. I'm good. And also, I think in a lot of the romance novels I write, and I've read the newer ones, it's very much also, it has a focus on the woman, particularly most of the time, the character development as well. You know, they're finding themselves. They're learning how to love, but also learning how to exist. You know, and I think that the fact that, and a lot of the times now, the romance facilitates that, not necessarily takes over her life. You know, it sort of assists her in making, better choices, hopefully that makes sense. So it sort of facilitates her development and so on, rather than completely takes it over, completely controls it, or completely makes her drop any developmental character. But yeah, hopefully that made sense. Yeah, it does. Y'all understood what you're saying, right? Yeah. Angie.
Well, I just want to echo what both authors would have said. So the first romance book I did read was a Mills and Boons. And if I were to read that today, I'd be like, why was I reading this? There's so many problematic things in here. Oh my God.
But we were eating it up.
Yes. But I think we are more aware of these issues now, especially I want to pinpoint consent, especially as one of those issues, because I know some of the stuff I was reading was a little iffy. I should not have been reading it as a teenager and enjoying it. But for me, especially when I'm writing, consent is very important in my books. And I do also want to, again, echo that the books are a lot more diverse now, although I want to say publishing is still very white. It's still very white, still working on it. It's a work in progress. But it has gotten, more diverse over time in terms of ethnicities and sexualities and just the setting as well of the books, because now I am able to read books written by authors in the Philippines, people in the Caribbean, not just the UK or the US. You have books from all over the world and places that you may not expect, a romance book to take place, but I just want to see more and more and more and more coming out from publishers. I just want them to know that, there's no end. There's no end to the diversity that you could have in the romance genre,
Oh, can I just add something? I'm just going to add, and with this diversity, you're seeing different takes on stories as well. So yeah, just wanted to add that in.
And I just want us to hold up the books and just see these covers. Yes. Like, this is what a romance book looks like now. Yeah.
It's no longer this guy with a guy. Can we just say the covers have evolved, honestly? Any more questions from the audience?
Oh. I didn't see the mic here. No, what I was trying to have you all state or make statements on the other side of romance, in that young men fall in love and have broken hearts too. I haven't heard of anything.
He's like, where's the trauma? Where's the heartbreak? Why are we hearing about people crying? But we do have some of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all smooth sailings in these books, okay? My heroes mess up a lot. The heroine messes up as well. There's like what we call the black moment in romance where somebody does something ridiculous and it's like, okay, I don't want to talk to this person, I don't want to deal with this person anymore, so they take time apart. But at the end, romance is about, even though you go through the rough patch, even though it's not a smooth sailing, you're gonna have your happily ever after and you're happy for now. And these characters, fight for that at the end of the book. So
No, I have nothing. I think she said it.
But we did have a scene in your book.
In my second novel, I write from a young man's perspective. There's a little Kojo who is as thirsty as Zainab. He's just younger. What does that say about me? But it also speaks to how even the genre is so gendered. Like I'm struggling to think of a male romance. I'm really struggling, but
There are a few in YA. I feel like YA is
in
really,
YA,
like
Adam Silvero.
and there's charming as a verb. I can't remember. Ben Felipe, I think is the author as well. That's a really good one I read recently. But there are a couple, I think, in YA especially. I think there are some, yeah.
We have time for one more question before we close up. Oh, yes. Yay.
Good morning, everyone. Congratulations, ladies, and to our very vivacious and wonderful host. I wanted to hear from these three lovely authors. What time of the day do you write? What is your writing format each day? Do you write each day? What time of the day? And what do you do when you get writer's block?
I will say that both of you are full-time employees, right? Yeah, so they're writing in their spare time. Love that.
yes, so as Cindy said, I have a full-time job right, in marketing. So I actually write mostly on the weekends because when I come home from work from that job, I just want to relax. I don't want to see, I mean, I do read before I go to sleep, but I don't want to see or read my book, right? I don't have a specific time of day. I guess on the weekend it might be in the morning or it might be sometime in the afternoon. And in terms of when you get a writer's block, I try not to force it. I will just leave the manuscript, let it marinate a bit, go read some other authors' books, go out with my friends, go watch a movie, something to relax your brain because it does happen. There are times where I do struggle with the manuscript, and actually in the series, the book that's now book 3 was going to be book 2. And I was like, okay, this needs to marinate a little bit more, so I switched it around and ended up making this book 2 instead because I was really kind of struggling with that one. So yeah, I think for me, and I know it will be different for other authors, everybody has their method, I just need to step away. I don't like to force the words out because that does not work. That does not work for me. So when I step away and I come back with fresh eyes, now it's like, oh, okay, yeah. It just kind of sorted out itself and the words are actually flowing after that.
Yeah. Actually, I am full-time now writing. Updating you.
Oh, she's up because this wasn't in her last book.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Now that I have my 3rd book coming out, I have chosen to write full-time. I will say I would love to write every day. I do try to write every day, especially if I'm on a deadline. And speaking of deadlines, like deadlines do not allow for writer's block, like you. Most of the time, if I do feel some sort of resistance, I have to like question it. Like, why am I not wanting to write this? Most of the time, it's either like I know there's something wrong that I need to fix and think through before I continue on, or like, I don't know, I'm facing some fear for some change that I have to make in the book. And so usually, for me, it is about pushing forward through it. Yeah, deadlines don't wait. Yeah. So, yeah.
But Sarah, I don't know how you get any writing done in Tobago because...
When you grow up in Tobago, you kind of get used to the beaches, you know.
Fair.
So I am also full-time. And this year, thanks to Rolex and
Say it two more times.
Rolex,
brand.
thank you.
Did you get that Rolex?
And I try to write every day when I'm working on a project. So now that I'm working on this book, it's show up on the page every single day. And what I do is also push through. Like, I set myself a type A 500 words a day limit. And it can be crap because I'm writing a shitty first draft. It can be just, I'm slogging through this, but I'm going to write the 500 words. And when it's a good day, sometimes I get to 3,000 and it flows. And other times it's like, okay, I know in the rewrites all of this is going into the bin, but I'm working that muscle. I'm really just showing myself up as I would if I had a 9 to 5. I wouldn't say, oh no, today I don't feel like working, so I'm not going to. So you show up at work every day and you're going to slog through, you know, like you're working, you're looking at the computer, that kind of thing. It's the same thing. And I don't experience writer's block as much because the ideas are plenty. What I suffer through is what you were talking about, where like you're struggling to get an idea down or you don't want to write. And then it's like, okay, if you are struggling to write this part, your reader is not going to enjoy it either. So make it exciting for yourself. So I'm learning to listen to that also. And then the last thing I'll say is having a child has been, he's coming home at 4 p.m., so you better be done with your writing before 4 p.m. So sometimes I'm like faffing away, like scrolling, and then it's 12, and I'm like, he's coming in 4 hours. Oh God, I need to have lunch and write. So that has made me hyper-focused also.
Okay, good. So have children, I guess,
Yes.
to help with the writer's block. I'm joking. Do not have children to help with your writer's block. Okay, so we're going up until 11:30. So I'm just going to ask each of the writers to read a piece from your work. I'm not sure who wants to go first. Aisha's like, no. Okay, Sarah. Sarah, you want to go? Okay, no. Angie, you go.
All right, so the piece that I chose to read, I think it showcases what I would have mentioned previously.
Oh, it is? This man is boofing me. Do not touch the mic.
Hello? Okay. All right, I chose this section because I think it highlights the differences in their personalities very well and who these two characters are as people. Reba arrived at his house on Saturday morning with her pastel pink hair up in 2 buns, a crop top that proclaimed "time to bake, bitches," and tight jeans. She strolled in like she owned his place, laptop tucked under her arm. He hadn't seen her since last weekend when the image of her slow hip movements had been burned into his brain. A distraction that kept popping up randomly throughout the week, which wasn't ideal when he was trying to finish up his presentation. Dax Designs had been one of the companies offered to bid on construction of a new adults-only resort and spa. He couldn't lose sight of his weekly to-do list, which didn't include daydreaming about Reba's legs, hips, or that damn tattoo. It had been very unlike him to lose focus like this. He couldn't blame any of it on the weed anymore. Something was happening to him and he did not like it. Well, this is not at all colorful. Just what I expected from you. You decorated yourself? She plopped herself down onto his couch as he looked around. Her fingers stroked the arm of the black couch she currently occupied. Her rainbow manicure a bright splash against the dark fabric. Yes, he followed the slow movement of her fingers as they danced over that arm. Man of a few words, as usual. We'll work on that, she announced. He tore his gaze away from her hand. Why? She wasn't here to work on him. This was about the bake-off. Reba crossed her legs, making herself more comfortable. He hadn't been thrilled about allowing Reba into his home, but to get this done, he had no choice. He was protective of his space, even from his family members. He hadn't had his family over for any long periods of time yet, So to have Reba here made him feel a little wary. She was a colorful explosion in his otherwise subdued space. He didn't do wild colors and was pleased with his end result. Subtle. Minimalistic was what he had been going for. His walls boasted some tasteful art prints, which were the only splashes of true colors to be found, and designs from architects he admired. His mother had visited and found the entire black and gray aesthetic to be cold. She tried to get him to add some pops of color via throw pillows. He had tucked them away in the bedroom and the guest room. They didn't belong in this living room, and neither did Reba. From what you've told me about this company bake-off, there's actually two parts to my master plan: the baking and the people skills. Clearly, you need help with both, and this can bring in the get Devon to have some fun bonus round perfectly. Devon frowned as Reba reached into her overly colorful case and pulled out her laptop. Not surprisingly, the front was covered with random stickers. So much clutter. Devon shuddered as he booted it up. He didn't have a single sticker on his that hadn't already come with the laptop. What is all this stuff on there? He couldn't help but ask. Reba tapped the top of the laptop. Different sayings I like. Sailor Moon stuff, fun things. Plain laptops are so boring. She waved at his perfectly clear laptop and wrinkled her nose. Case in point. Clutter-free, just like I like it. Boring, she repeated. She tapped a nail against her cheek, drawing his eye to the curve of her cheekbone, which glinted with some bit of makeup he didn't know the name for. Reba had a full face going on there. We'll work on that. You know, you didn't have to get this dressed up for baking. Dressed up? This is my casual day look, she chuckled. Dressed up, he says. She shook her head, clearly amused. But your face is shiny right here, he pointed to his own cheekbones. That means you have on that thing that does that. The word you're looking for is highlighter. I barely have a full face going on. There's a smidge of foundation, the highlighter, my winged eyeliner, some mascara, a swish of gloss because leave the house with a bare lip? Never. She shuddered. And a dash of powder. That barely took me 10 minutes. Okay. Devon didn't have anything else to add to that. It sounded like a lot, but what did he know? He remembered being over at Monica's one time when she was doing one of her no makeup looks, but she had taken quite a bit of time in the bathroom. Putting on makeup to look like you didn't have on any was a strange concept, but he had probed further. Reba's makeup routine didn't concern him. What was concerning was her desire to tweak him. Anyways, I hired you to help me with baking, not a personality makeover. Wrong. Didn't you say your boss's assistant basically told you that you needed to be more involved in work things? Devon regretted sharing that bit of information. From what you've explained, she went on, your boss is looking for more from you. He wants to know you're taking this seriously and willing to be a part of the team, not just work-wise. You don't even know him. Sure, he had explained the meeting, what Amanda had said, and what the bake-off entailed. But Reba suddenly thinking she had some insight into Dax was far-fetched. How could she possibly think she knew anything about him without having met the man? And I have people skills. I don't need your help with that. Her laugh was loud enough that Devon was certain his neighbors could hear her through the walls. He didn't usually have company over on a weekend. Reba's appearance was sure to be noticed. They had decided to get an early start. So Reba arrived at 8 so they could go over the game plan. At least she was punctual. But now, instead of actually discussing baking plans, she was talking about people skills and helping him have fun. None of that mattered, at least where Reba was concerned. He didn't need her for that. He just needed to get to the baking part. I told you about this fun plan of yours. I actually thought that was just you being high and talking nonsense. I remember everything we discussed. The fun coordinator plan is still on the table, and just so you know, I did my research on your boss. Some light social media stalking proves that man loves people and loves interacting with them. Real participation is going to be important here. She stuck up 2 fingers. Secondly, not to bust your bubble, but you aren't even close to being a people person. You barely acted like I existed at the wedding, and you ran away from our party last weekend. Devon frowned. Reba wasn't entirely wrong. He could make more of an effort where mingling at work was concerned, and he planned to, in his own way. But Reba's cursory research of Dax had revealed what was a fact. The man did love people. He was an extrovert who walked around each morning greeting employees. That didn't mean Devon wanted to acknowledge that Reba was spot on. The thought of her teaching him to people or have fun, he could only imagine what she would expect him to do. Reba was obviously fearless when it came to that. He had seen her walk up to guests at Ava's wedding and strike up a conversation as if she'd known them for years. But she was too much of a wildcard to entrust with these sorts of lessons. She might try to get him to wander around in a rainbow-colored wig for all he knew. They had to stay on track. He could work on his supposed shortcomings himself. I didn't run from the party, he said, because that was a ridiculous assumption. What would you call your hasty exit then? It just wasn't my scene. Okay, so what's your scene then? Before he'd given up on making an effort with his friends, he had met up with them for the occasional dinner, or they would go around the island checking out the old buildings. They'd even had a long-standing meetup for the Scrabble tournaments that took place sometimes. He didn't tell Reba any of that because she would definitely repeat her mantra of boring. He couldn't imagine her finding any of that interesting. It doesn't matter, we're here to bake. This is wasting time. He turned his laptop to face her. So, here's my idea.
Angie, you do such a great job of writing secondary characters and writing extrovert and introvert. That whole walking around the office and telling everybody, hello, I am that guy. Up next is Sarah.
So I am reading, hold on one second. It's going to be, the setup for this is actually a flashback. So it's going to be taking place 6 years before the current timeline in the novel. This is when, just before Aiden and Raina meet for the first time. 6 years earlier. I met Aiden in early July. It was my last day of primary school, the official start of my 2-month vacation. After a year of intense studying for the secondary entrance assessment, I was finally free to do nothing, and I planned to do just that for as long as possible. Mummy, unaware of these plans, did not take me straight home after school. Just a quick hello, she said. 2 minutes. I knew this meant an hour in the hotel, minimum. She wanted me with her to welcome a particular auntie who came to stay at the Plumeria once a year. This auntie was an elderly Trinidadian who now lived in New York. She liked to pinch my cheeks a little too hard. She smelled like she bathed in peppermint, but she told the funniest stories and loved giving presents. This time, she brought me 2 boxes of toffees, a special brand only made in an artisan shop in Brooklyn. As Mommy pulled into our driveway an hour later, I mapped out the perfect hiding spot for the sweets. I decided on the farthest corner of the vegetable drawer, somewhere Daddy wouldn't think to look. When it came to sweets, he could not be trusted. It would be nice if you made Auntie Jen a card to say thank you, Mommy said, in the way that made it seem like she was only making a suggestion, but she wasn't. She'd like that. But I told her thank you when she gave it to me. Mommy cut the engine. It would be a nice thing to do, Raina. You like art. Why don't you draw something on it? I sighed and popped open the car door. Calypso music flooded into the vehicle, upbeat and bouncy, the song blazing with roaring brass and snappy percussion. Mommy climbed out of the car and shut the door. Haven't heard this one in a while. She tilted her head to the side, listening, then began to sing along in English and Spanish. What? I asked, confused. It's Calypso Rose. Oh, she groaned. No Spanish, no music history. What was I paying them to teach you at that school? I didn't answer. Mommy was big on protecting and celebrating Trinidad and Tobago culture and the community. That was why she often used the Plumeria and her resources to support and invest in local businesses. The art, furniture, and much of the foods at the hotel were sourced from the islands when possible. Listen good, Raina, she said. This is music. This is the sound of your roots. I pointed to the end of Exora Drive. I think the sound of my roots is coming from Old Man Chandra's house. That's right. Miss Clay, our neighbor, answered from the other side of the fence that separated her yard from ours. A couple of plastic grocery bags hung from her hands. It looked like she'd just arrived home too. You telling me the old man's playing this? Mommy laughed. I didn't know he had such good taste. It's his grandson, Mrs. Clay said. Mr. Chandra had a grandson? Shellhaven was a smallish village. Everyone knew each other, if not by name, then at least by face. But somehow, Old Man Chandra remained a mystery. In his 70s, he lived alone, kept to himself. A fisherman all his life, he left for the beach before dawn and returned from market well after dark. Sometimes he went unseen for months. The only proof of life were the lights that came on in his house at night. Up until that moment, I had no idea he had family. Young boy, about 11 or 12 now, Miss Clay drew closer to the fence, eager to share. He stayed with Chandra for a few weeks. I think he came to help with the fishing. Did his mother also come and visit too? Mommy asked, surprising me. Clearly she had more information on the situation than I did. I haven't seen her since before Raina was born. It does seem so, Miss Clay said. But then I'm not surprised after the way he kicked her out for getting pregnant. Not that any of us could say we didn't see that coming. That girl was always, you know. But I'm still surprised she let the child visit that man after everything. Mommy's eyes narrowed. But maybe she didn't have a choice but to send him here, especially if she's still on her own. Her words took on a sharp tone. Mrs. Clay didn't seem to notice. I wouldn't be surprised if she was, you know, the apple don't fall far. Mommy didn't answer. Her gaze focused across the road. A boy about my age had stepped out of the bushes. He clutched a gray cinder block to his chest, then disappeared into the trees next to Mr. Chandra's yard. What is he doing? Mommy asked. Who knows? Miss Clay shrugged. Pat said he was over by her earlier, offered to cut her lawn for $50. What does he want that kind of money for? Mommy? Non-committally. The music changed to a Marshall Montano song. I did recognize this one, and without thinking, I started swaying to the rhythm. Mrs. Clay dropped her voice. But how are you doing, Claire? Everything good now? I see your hair growing back in. It's lovely. Thank you. Mommy gave her a tight lip smile, slicked down one of her sideburns. But this still isn't mine. My chest squeezed, and I stopped moving. Oh, Mrs. Clay drew backward. Try cutting your hair on the new moon. It's supposed to make it grow faster. She lifted the grocery bags. I need to pack these away. We'll talk later. Mommy? Again, eyes still across the road. From the tilt of her head, I could tell she was planning something. I started toward the house, but she called out just as I hit the first step. Raina, go next door and say hello to Mr. Chandra's grandson. I stopped. Do I have to? It would be a nice thing to do. She crossed the lawn to meet me. That poor boy. I know what it's like to have strangers judge you and your family. Growing up, it was just me and my mother. She took the bag from my hands. When my mother was busy, I had to go stay with any family that would take me. It would have been so much easier if the people I met were nicer to me. Before I could object, she removed the one box of toffees and handed it to me. Give that to him as a welcome present, she said. I gaped. My supply of toffees halved in the blink of an eye. But those are mine. Don't be greedy, Raina. She grasped my shoulders, spun me around, and nudged me towards Mr. Chandra's house. Make sure and come back before dark. I huffed, marching away from her. Before dark, she said, like I was going to spend any more than 5 seconds over there.
Wow. Isn't that like so Caribbean? Like I felt everything, the neighbor having all the information, you listening to be like somebody new is in. Love it. Over to you, Ayesha.
Okay, so I'm going to read one of Zainab's New York moments. So she's had a fight with her bestie and she's left the hotel they were in. It wasn't that late when I left the hotel, so I strode out onto 14th Street where the last stragglers were exiting closing shops. The 2 beers had given me a nice buzz, and sitting on a train seemed like an especially sad end to what had been a rather deflating evening. If there was such a thing as a runner's high, there had to be the equivalent for walkers like me. There was nothing like a walk to get the good feelings going. This weird evening warranted a long walk. Ahead of me, travelers melded with revelers, and office workers made a dash for their weekends. I lingered at Union Square where break dancers and bucket drummers had pulled a crowd to them. I made a right on Broadway, the thoroughfare once known as the King's Highway, which went all the way up to New England, my old life. I strode past Forbidden Planet where I'd spent many late afternoons fantasizing about the day I would have a comic book of my own. I liked walking down this way because this part of Manhattan was like one giant campus. Blockbuster, bookstores, NYU student discount signs all over the place, college-age types huddling together. I went down to Houston Street, which I was rudely taught to pronounce correctly one day I had to meet Denswa in Soho. Not Houston, an old lady groused, Houston. I admired the graffiti competing with peeling advertisements near the Bowery, and it brought to mind Keith Haring and his iconic shaking people, and how the New York City of his time must have been so different from mine. When I realized there were fewer people around, I found myself constantly peering over my shoulder, especially in the treed area as I approached the Lower East Side. Maybe it wasn't so different, but I calmed down. This New York was tame. Uncle Ali had told me one evening as Miles Davis poured out of his computer speakers. I don't know why the whole moment had stayed in my brain, but I could remember it clearly. Before Rudy, he said, referring to one mayor of New York who had supposedly cleaned things up, you wouldn't catch me walking down the street. I could have taken the train home at any point, but I was driven by an impulse to keep going. The heat of the last couple of days had lifted, and it was the perfect summer evening, warm with a hint of a breeze. I went down Ludlow Street, where party people had lined up in front of pianos, and the various places Mary Grace and I had found ourselves on one Thursday night too many. At Essex and Delancey came my last chance to get on a train, but it was too beautiful an evening. The moon was now clear in the sky, above the brown silhouettes of the housing projects, wisps of cloud around her waxen half. So I continued on Delancey, the lights of the Williamsburg Bridge calling. Bicycles shot past me, cars and trucks rattled by, and I began my incline up the bridge. By summer's end, I wanted to have crossed as many bridges in New York City as I could. There were such feats of engineering genius and design. My father had wanted me to do structural engineering, his own dream job. He'd ended up teaching physics instead. But I was too much of a storyteller to live his dreams. When he next visited, we would walk on this bridge, and as many as he would allow me to show him. I missed him and wanted to talk to him about things I couldn't broach with my mother, like how he lost his faith and found it again. Maybe he'd have an explanation for the voices I was hearing, and everything would make sense. He told me he was agnostic in his university days, and maybe even when he'd met my mother, which she had probably chosen to interpret as someone she could convert to her religion. Emma saw the world along very specific lines, like everything had to be pristinely clean, and life's big changes happened because Allah willed them so. And these beliefs weren't to be crossed or colored out of. Maybe because she and I had spent too much time together, we knew how to annoy each other, me with my mess, she with her rules. And because of that, Papa had fewer faults in my eyes. Why don't you call him then? This was a voice. He was too busy with his new family to listen to my troubles. Or what if he said something that destroyed the image I had kept of him? I loved the way he was a dreamer and left room for doubt. He was the one who taught me to love walks and to notice the things everyone seemed to be ignoring. He introduced me to the word flâneur. He loved French literature and movies. Let's go, ma petite flâneuse, he called out every time we left the house for a walk. I felt a twinge of sadness. Was it only Papa who truly understood me? And yet I couldn't even call him. Maybe there was hope with Alex. If we worked out, I hope we would have a good relationship, that he wouldn't annoy me, judge me, belittle me, or keep things from me. As I approached the middle of the bridge, my thoughts shifted to people who had ended their lives by throwing their bodies into waters like this. They had to have been pushed by very powerful forces, physical or spiritual. That evening, I was feeling sad because I couldn't understand my relationships. Why did it feel like Denswa and Mary Grace kept things from me? But even that sadness couldn't push me that far. I looked behind me to make sure no person with designs on shoving me was close by, even though a large cage had been set up to prevent any falls. The fear is ancestral. I stopped to look at downtown Brooklyn and pictured people traveling by a ferry boat to cross over from Manhattan before this bridge even existed. I could see the men smoking their cigars, separated from the women. What would it look like in another 100 years? When I landed on Brooklyn soil, such a rush of accomplishment spread over me that my sadness was replaced with pure joy. This was the walker's high. I was descending the ramp when a body bumped into me. I tripped, and before I realized what was going on, the person had snatched my bag. I wanted to shout, but my voice got stuck in my throat. So much for Rudy, the mayor who had cleaned things up. Hey, my bag! Finally, my voice was squeaking out. Let it go, said one of the voices. But how could I? It contained my keys, my wallet, my credit card, and $10. My phone, a small makeup kit, my notebook filled with sketches of Sam's hair. Sam is her boss who she's thirsting after. My passport, my beloved passport. Hey, I said again, a small croak of a sound, but it was too late. The person had disappeared into the blurry gray of the New York night.
What is not a New York walk without getting your things stolen?
It never, oh no, I'm not gonna say this because I'm going back to New York, touch wood.
But also, like, why is she walking around with her passport? Like,
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for reading from your lovely work. If you want to find out what happens next, please go and purchase the books. They're really good. I've read all three, and I highly recommend them all. Please go and support these authors. They're doing signing outside, and thank you so much for spending your time with us here at Bocas. Thank you so much.